Moved on. This is my house now. I stared at the handwriting, hers, and smiled. She forgot one thing, the deed. That's when I stopped being the daughter she left behind and started becoming her biggest regret. When I first saw her silhouette on my porch, I thought I was hallucinating. The soft knock on the door at 6:30 in the morning, the hesitant, almost rehearsed way she said my name, Julia, as if testing the air. I hadn't seen or heard from my mother in 27 years. Not on birthdays, not when I graduated college, not even when Grandma passed and I buried her in a cold November rain. Veronica disappeared when I was 14, and I learned not to speak her name in this house after the third year of silence. Now she stood there, thinner than I remembered, older of course, but with that same sharpness in her cheekbones and guarded eyes. Her once orange hair was greying at the temples, pulled back in a tight bun like she was trying to maintain control over at least one thing in her life. "Hi," she said, trying to smile. I didn't know who else to call." I didn't say anything right away, not because I was angry. I had moved past that rage years ago, but because I didn't know how to respond to a ghost. She stood there in the cold, clutching a duffel bag that looked too small to contain any real life. "I lost my job," she continued. "Things got complicated. The landlord changed the locks. I don't have anywhere else to go. Something in me wanted to shut the door. Not slam it, just slowly, gently close it. But I didn't. Instead, I stepped aside and let her in. She looked around as she entered, moving slowly through the foyer like she was walking through a memory. Her eyes lingered on the framed picture of Grandma by the stairs. "She never forgave me, did she? She died without saying your name," I replied plainly. Veronica didn't respond. She just nodded and sank into the living room chair, the same one Grandma used to knit in, her body deflated like a balloon. And for a moment I saw a flicker of something real, shame maybe, or exhaustion. "Just a few days," she whispered, "until I figure something out." I should have asked more questions. I should have told her no, but that little girl in me, the one who used to wait on the porch every Friday, hoping she'd show up, won. So I set up the guest room. I didn't sleep that night. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, trying to reconcile the woman down the hall with the one who vanished after telling me she'd be right back. I heard her get up once, rummaging through the kitchen for tea. She didn't ask where anything was, she remembered, and that unsettled me more than anything. By the next morning, she'd cleaned the countertops, arranged the throw pillows in a way Grandma never would have, and made eggs. "Sunny side up your favourite," she said. I remembered. I ate in silence. She filled the silence with stories. Some about people I didn't know, some I suspected she made up. She didn't ask about me, didn't ask if I'd married, if I had kids, if I was happy. It was like she was trying to pick up from a script we never wrote. Later that week, she asked if she could use the master bedroom. "My back's been acting up," she explained. "That old mattress in the guest room is like sleeping on gravel." It was my room, my bed, my closet. But I nodded. It was just temporary. That first week I told myself it was progress. I was healing. I was doing the right thing. Veronica, or Mum, as she now insisted I call her, like the word hadn't rusted out of use years ago, slipped into the rhythm of the house faster than I expected. She was careful not to overstep, not at first. She folded laundry that wasn't hers. She left handwritten notes on the fridge. "Have a great class today." Or I bought more chamomile tea, like we were roommates, not long-lost mother and daughter. With 3 decades of silence between us, she started calling me her angel. "You're my saving grace, Julia," she'd say almost daily, sometimes with watery eyes. "I prayed for another chance with you. I must have done something right because here you are." I wanted to believe her. God help me, I did. At work, my colleagues noticed the change. I smiled more. I even brought lunch from home, something I hadn't done in years. My best friend and fellow professor, Camille, raised an eyebrow one afternoon. "You're glowing," she teased. "What's his name?" "No hair." "My mum's staying with me for a bit," I replied, feeling a strange warmth at how casually I said it. Camille's smile faded. "Wait, your mum?" Yeah, long story. She didn't press, but she looked worried. Back at home, the small things began. First was the bedroom request. I was in the kitchen finishing up some grading when she shuffled in, rubbing her lower back with a doise. "That guest bed is awful," she said. "I swear I wake up more sore than when I went to sleep." I looked up. "I could add a topper, might help." "I hate to ask," she said gently, "but would you mind switching rooms just until I feel better? My spine's a mess after that car accident in '03. I blinked. I didn't remember any car accident, but I didn't question it. "It's your home," she added quickly. "I'd never ask if I wasn't in so much pain." That sentence struck something inside me, the guilt pang, the one children of absent parents know too well. So I nodded. Sure, just temporary. The next day, while I was at work, she moved her things into the master bedroom. By the time I came home, my bed had been remade with her floral comforter, and my clothes were folded in boxes, stacked neatly by the door. "I didn't want you to strain your back," she said sweetly. "Figured I'd get it out of the way." That night, I slept on the pull-out couch in the living room. Just for now, I told myself. She made herself useful. She cooked, she dusted, she rearranged the spice rack and the linen closet. I tried not to mind. After all, I'd lived alone for so long. It was nice to have company, wasn't it? But things that had been static for years began to shift. The picture of Grandma disappeared from the mantel. When I asked, she said she'd moved it to the hallway where the light was better. The music I liked playing on weekends was replaced with her news radio. She started getting up early, planting herself at the dining table with her laptop. Mine actually borrowed just until she got a new one and making calls. She told the mailman one day that we were fixing up our home. Twice I overheard her on the phone telling someone that her daughter was letting her get back on her feet in the house she grew up in. That last one stuck with me. She didn't grow up here. I did. I didn't notice the missing picture of Grandpa until I walked past the staircase and caught an unfamiliar blank spot on the wall. The frame that had held his navy portrait, complete with crooked tie and half smile, was gone. At first I thought maybe it had fallen, but there were no shards, no nail dangling, just smooth, freshly patched drywall. When I asked Veronica, she barely looked up from the living room where she was flipping through curtain swatches. "Oh, that old thing," she said. "I moved it to the hall closet. Didn't match the new palette I'm going for." "New palette? What palette?" She smiled like I'd asked her about a shared Pinterest board. "I'm thinking coastal elegance meets modern farmhouse. All this vintage stuff just feels stale, like ghosts are still walking through the place." I stared at her. That was his navy photo. It's been there for 30 years. "Well," she said, standing up and stretching her back theatrically, "maybe it's time for some fresh energy." The next morning, the sheer white curtains I'd hung in the dining room, Grandma's favourites, had been replaced with thick beige blackout panels. "These breathe better," she explained over coffee, "and they block glare. You don't want sun damage on the floors, do you?" The spice rack was reorganised again. The teacups were now in drawers, while she'd hung her mismatched mugs on a new rack by the sink. One by one, the rooms began to shift. Not in grand ways, but with quiet certainty. The floral runner from the hallway, replaced with a plain grey mat, the crocheted blanket Grandma made, folded and boxed. It smelled dusty, she said. I tried to rationalise it. She was nesting, trying to feel useful, reclaiming some sense of control. But every change felt like a subtle eraser. I opened a cabinet one night to grab the old blue ceramic bowl I always used for popcorn, and it was gone, replaced by gleaming white porcelain bowls, all brand new. "Where's the blue one?" I asked. Veronica didn't even look up from her book. Chipped, tossed it. My hand clenched around the cabinet knob. That bowl wasn't just chipped, it had been Grandma's. She used it every Sunday when she made strawberry shortcake. It had history, weight, meaning, and now it was in a landfill. Later that week, I came home early to find the living room completely rearranged. The couch faced the opposite direction, the rug had been flipped, and the antique mirror above the mantel was missing. I stood there, bag still in hand, trying to make sense of the warped familiarity. Veronica emerged from the hallway with a tape measure. "Oh, good. You're home. I was just thinking the room needed better flow. Don't you feel lighter in here?" I didn't answer. She took my silence as agreement. That night I sat in the guest room, my new semi-permanent space, and stared at the boxes of my things stacked neatly against the wall. My books, my frames, my grandmother's embroidery hoops. Everything that used to live in this house was now in storage, except me. I was still here, but only technically. Saturday afternoon, I came home to the smell of roast chicken and loud voices echoing from the kitchen. I hadn't been told we were expecting company, but there they were, 3 people I barely recognized, chatting animatedly around my dining table like it was their regular haunt. "Julia," Veronica called cheerfully from the stove, "come meet everyone." "Everyone? This is your cousin Rachel," she said, pointing to a woman who looked vaguely like someone I remembered from a blurry childhood photo. "And her husband, Dawn, and that's Aunt Lisa. You probably don't remember her, but she used to babysit you when you were 3. I offered a polite nod, but my chest felt tight. The dining room was unrecognizable again. The lace tablecloth, handmade by Grandma, was gone, replaced with a burlap runner and decorative mason jars holding artificial sunflowers. Our old plates had been swapped for sleek white ones. It looked like a home decor magazine, not home. "So, this is the famous house," Rachel said, looking around. "Wow, you've really transformed it, Veronica." "Thank you," Mum beamed. "It's been a labor of love. Took me years to get it back, but I always knew I would." "Get it back?" Rachel blinked. "Wait, you mean you finally got the title transferred?" There was a brief, sharp pause. Veronica laughed lightly. "Oh, no, not yet. But it's just paperwork at this point. You know how slow lawyers can be." My stomach dropped. I watched her float through the kitchen like a hostess in her domain, pouring wine, making jokes, speaking in we statements that excluded me entirely. "We redid the living room," she said. "We're thinking of updating the kitchen backsplash next." No one corrected her. Why would they? She was charming, commanding, believable. It wasn't until Don asked if I was her roommate that the floor beneath me started to crack. "So, are you renting or just helping your mum out for a while?" he asked casually. I blinked. "I own this house." "Oh," he laughed. "Sorry, just the way she was talking, I assumed." Veronica swept in, placing a bowl on the table. "Julia's just being modest. I let her stay here while she teaches at the university. It's a good setup for both of us. Let me stay here." I stared at her and she didn't flinch. Later that evening, I caught Aunt Lisa by the hallway mirror, adjusting her scarf. "She's done well, hasn't she?" she said to me. "Who?" "Your mother. I remember when she first told me her plan, maybe 5, 6 years ago. Said she'd come back when the time was right and reclaim what was hers. Honestly, I thought she was dreaming. But look at this place. It's just like she imagined." I froze. Her plan. "Oh, don't be upset," she said gently. "It's good that you two are back together. Every daughter needs her mother." I didn't respond. Because at that moment, I realized the truth wasn't that my mother needed a place to stay. She'd always planned to come back and take everything. It started with a voice, muffled low, coming from behind the half-closed master bedroom door. I hadn't meant to eavesdrop. I was heading to the laundry room when I heard her. Veronica, speaking in a tone I hadn't heard before, measured, deliberate, professional. "Yes," she said. "The deed's still in her name for now, but that can be amended. She's emotionally unstable, has no family to support her. I'm essentially her caretaker." I froze. "I've lived here for months," she continued. "Everything's in my name. Bills, mail, even the internet. It'll be easy to demonstrate occupancy. Once we establish dependency, we can move forward." There was a pause. "Then, of course, I'll send over the documentation. I have her signature on some things. She won't contest. It's just a matter of time." I stepped back, my heart hammering. I didn't need to hear more. For a moment, I just stood there in the hallway, gripping the laundry basket with white knuckles, trying to process what I just heard. She was talking to a lawyer about my house, about taking my house. I waited until I heard her end the call. Then I knocked. She opened the door like nothing had happened, wearing a smile, too practiced to be maternal. "Hey, sweetheart, everything okay? Who are you talking to?" She blinked. "Just an old friend. I heard you say something about transferring the deed." Her smile didn't falter, but her voice cooled. "You must have misheard." "I didn't." She sighed and walked past me back towards the kitchen. "I'm trying to set up some long-term security. That's not a crime. You'll thank me one day." "Security for you, you mean?" "I'm your mother, Julia. I've been living here, paying for things, helping you. It's not so unreasonable to want a stake in the place." "A stake? You disappeared for 27 years. You don't get a stake in anything." That was the first time her mask slipped, just a flicker of something sharp beneath the surface. She set her mug down with more force than necessary. "I raised you," she snapped, "until you were a teenager. Do you think this house just landed in your lap because you're special?" "It did. It's called a will, and I'm the only name on it." Veronica's voice dropped lower now. "Well, wills can be challenged." I felt the floor tilt beneath me. The foundation of everything I'd believed about her return, about second chances, was crumbling. That night, I couldn't sleep. I went to my filing cabinet and pulled out the manila envelope I hadn't touched in years. Inside were the official documents from Grandma's estate, the deed, the title, the notarized will naming me sole heir. I called my lawyer the next morning. "I need to make sure everything's airtight," I told him, "and I need to know what to do if someone's trying to contest ownership." He was calm, thorough. "You're the legal owner," he confirmed, after reviewing the files. "But if someone is living with you and trying to claim occupancy or guardianship over you, things can get messy." Could she win? Not unless she can prove you're incompetent or that the documents were obtained under duress, which they weren't. Then you're fine, but I document everything from now on. That night, I changed the password on the Wi-Fi, set up security cameras, backed up every digital record. I started a journal, logging everything Veronica said, every little change he made. I wasn't just fighting for a house anymore, I was preparing for war. It was a Wednesday evening when Veronica introduced Frank. I had just come home from a long, dead day of lectures and grading when I saw him. Balding, broad-shouldered, wearing a tank top and gym shorts. His muddy boots leaving streaks across the hardwood floors I'd polished last weekend. "This is Frank," Veronica beamed from the kitchen. "He's staying with us for a while, just until he gets back on his feet." "Excuse me," I said, barely dropping my bag. "He's between apartments," she explained, "and he's helping me fix the deck." "You've been saying it's a hazard, haven't you?" I hadn't. Frank gave me a nod, then popped open a soda from my fridge without asking. "Nice place," he muttered, already looking around like he was cataloguing what he'd change. The next few days felt like living with a stranger who had no concept of boundaries. He left the bathroom door open. He played music loudly at night. He walked around shirtless, even when I had colleagues over for a Zoom call. He snored like a broken engine and insisted on leaving the windows open despite the cold. Once I caught him going through the hallway cabinet where I kept personal documents. "Looking for aspirin," he said flatly, not even bothering to hide the manila folders he has shoved aside. When I brought it up to Veronica, her response stunned me. "Relax," she said. "This is my house too." Frank didn't mean anything by it. "Your house?" She turned slowly, her face a mixture of disbelief and disdain. "Julia, honey, did you really forget? You've been letting me stay out of kindness. But this house, this home was built by my family. I grew up here. I brought you home from the hospital into this house. It's not some Airbnb you get to control." I was speechless. She wasn't yelling. She wasn't even emotional. She was calm, firm, like she was stating a long-accepted fact. Later that night, I sat in my car outside the pharmacy parking lot, too numb to drive home. I scrolled through old emails, bank statements, anything that might remind me that I wasn't insane. Then I remembered something Lisa, her sister, had said during that family gathering. I remember when she first told me her plan, maybe 5, 6 years ago, said she'd come back when the time was right and reclaim what was hers. It had sounded like delusion at the time, but now sitting there under the flickering streetlight, I started to piece things together. She never lost her job. There was no eviction. I pulled up her LinkedIn. Her profile had been recently updated. She'd removed her current job, but a cached version from 3 months ago showed she was still employed at a boutique firm in Atlanta. I found more. Public records showed no court case for eviction, no judgments, no landlord disputes. She hadn't come here because she had nowhere else to go. She came here because she planned to. This had never been about a mother reconnecting with her daughter. It was about a woman executing a long-laid strategy to reclaim a house she believed was stolen. And I had opened the door and handed her the keys. Frank never left. What started as a short stay turned permanent faster than I could track. One morning, I came downstairs and saw a second toothbrush beside the sink, his boots lined up neatly next to mine by the door, and his coat hanging on the same hook Grandma used to keep her sun hat. No one had asked, no one had warned me. He just stayed. Then came the kitchen schedule. Veronica pinned a laminated sheet on the fridge like we were roommates in a college dorm. Kitchen use schedule shared respectfully. 7:00 9 a.m. Veronica and Frank 9:10 a.m. Julia 12:01 p.m. Julia must clean up before 1 sharp. 7 p.m. Veronica and Frank dinner prep. I stared at it for a full minute trying to process the absurdity. When I confronted her, she didn't even flinch. "You're not the only one living here," she said. "We all need to respect each other's routines," I asked. "Frank doesn't even live here legally." Veronica raised her eyebrows. "He does now. He updated his ID." I felt my jaw tighten. "And what about me? This is my house." She smiled like I'd just said something quaint. "Of course it is, sweetheart. But ownership comes with responsibility, cooperation. You've had this space to yourself for too long. You're not used to sharing." The next week, I invited Camille over for dinner, something we used to do twice a month before Veronica arrived. It felt like a lifeline, a way to remind myself that I still had control, still had some tether to my own life. But when Camille arrived, Veronica blocked the door with a disapproving look. "Oh, sorry," she said with a polite smile. "We weren't told about company. It's just not a good night." Camille glanced at me. "Is this a bad time?" "No," I said firmly. "It's fine," but it wasn't. Veronica lingered in the kitchen the whole evening, slamming cabinets just a little too loudly, sighing dramatically every few minutes. Frank came in halfway through dinner and changed the channel on the TV without asking. Camille left early. "I don't know what's happening here," she said quietly at the door, "but this isn't you." I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, something in me snapped. I dug into my records again, determined to reassert control. I was still the homeowner. I still paid the taxes. There had to be a way to prove it. I logged into the city's property portal, something I hadn't done in over a year. My name was still on the deed. But what caught my eye was something I hadn't expected. Under the residential occupancy registry, a new entry had been added. Primary resident Veronica M. Harris. Relationship to owner mother date. Registered 6 weeks ago. Authority level primary point of contact, head of household. I stared at the screen. She'd registered herself as the head of household without my permission, without my knowledge. A second form had been submitted just 2 weeks later. Co-occupant added Frank G. Wilkins, status permanent resident. I felt sick. My mother hadn't just moved in, she'd replaced me. Frank took to his new role like he'd been rehearsing it his whole life. Within days of being labelled a permanent resident, he began referring to the house as our place. Not Veronica's, not mine, ours. "Got to keep the energy good in our house," he said once while burning some musky incense in the living room. "Our house needs better security," he muttered another time while fiddling with the locks. Locks I had changed years ago, now mysteriously wrecked with no word to me. I came home one afternoon to find him giving a delivery guy instructions on where to leave a new coffee table. "Put it right there under the window," he barked. "Don't scratch the floors. My wife will kill me." "Wife?" I stepped in. "Excuse me, who's your wife?" Frank grinned. "Just a figure of speech, Jules. Don't get so uptight." Veronica emerged from the kitchen, drying her hands with a new towel I'd never seen before. "He just means we're a family now. We all have a say in the space." "No, I wanted to say you don't. You live here, but this isn't yours." But instead, I said nothing, because every time I pushed back, they'd respond with concern, not confrontation. "Maybe you need rest," Veronica would say, voice soft. "You've been so tense lately." "Could be burnout," Frank added once. "Professors don't get enough vacation, huh?" It was subtle, manipulative. They weren't fighting me, they were gaslighting me, chipping away at my authority until I questioned myself. And then came the night I came home late from campus after a conference dinner. It was almost midnight when I pulled into the driveway, exhausted and aching for a hot shower and my pull-out couch. But the porch light was off, unusual. And when I tried my key, the front door didn't budge. Confused, I knocked. No answer. I texted Veronica, "Hey, door's locked. My key's not working." No reply. I stood there for 10 minutes, unsure what to do, before walking around to the back entrance and letting myself in through the sliding glass door, thankfully still open. I made it 2 steps into the kitchen before flashing red and blue lights lit up the window, banging on the front door. "Police, open up!" I froze. 2 officers stood on the porch, hands resting on their belts. I opened the door slowly. "You live here?" one asked. "Yes," I said. "I mean, it's my house." "We got a call about a possible break-in," the other said, looking down at his tablet. "Caller said a woman was attempting to enter unlawfully." My breath caught. "Caller?" They showed me the dispatch report. Name, Veronica Harris, relationship to property, mother of occupant. Occupant, Frank Wilkins. I stared at the names like they were strangers. I pulled out my ID, then my property deed from my purse, a habit I'd picked up in the last month. One of the officers read it, then looked back at me. "This shows you as the sole owner." "Yes," I said firmly. "I live here. They're my guests." He raised an eyebrow. "Then why your mother report you for trespassing?" I didn't have an answer. I went inside. The officers followed, did a brief walkthrough, and eventually left after resolving the misunderstanding. Veronica never apologized. Frank never looked up from his beer. And me? I realized that night that I was no longer just losing control. I was being erased, one manipulation at a time. The next morning, I skipped work. I couldn't sit in front of a classroom and pretend to teach young minds about literature while mine was unraveling inside a house that no longer felt like mine. I drove straight to my lawyer's office downtown, hands still shaking from the events of the night before. The break-in, the police, the dead stare from Veronica, as if I were some stranger barging into her home. It was no longer just emotional warfare. This had become legal, tactical, a deliberate campaign to remove me from the property I inherited, from the life I had built. Mr. Callahan, my lawyer, listened carefully as I laid everything out. From the kitchen schedules to the false police report to the latest, the occupancy registration listing Veronica as head of household. He didn't interrupt, just scribbled notes with his Mont Blanc pen, and occasionally let out soft, disappointed hums. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and steepled his fingers. "We need to see everything she's filed," he said. "If she's claiming any form of authority over the property, it should be on record somewhere." He made a few calls, requested access to county housing documents, and by early afternoon, we had what we needed, or rather what I feared we'd find. There it was, filed just 3 weeks ago. Form 3182B, Temporary Property Management Proxy Authorization, filed by Veronica M. Harris, signed by Julia M. Roberts. Except I had never signed it, and the signature at the bottom, though skillfully copied, was not mine. My chest tightened. I pointed at the screen. "That's forged." Callahan nodded grimly. She's filed this form to establish temporary management rights, claiming that you granted her authority to act on your behalf due to emotional stress and capacity concerns. It's not legally strong without supporting evidence, but it's enough to confuse smaller agencies, utility companies, building inspectors, even local law enforcement. I clenched my fists. So she used this to register as the head of household. Most likely it's how she got utilities rerouted, mail redirected, and co-residentidency approval for Frank. Bureaucracies don't always verify signatures. They process stamp move on. And the fact that it's a lie? I asked, voice rising. He met my eyes. That's where we fight back. He walked me through the process. I'd need to submit a formal affidavit declaring the document fraudulent, request an immediate withdrawal of Veronica's proxy status, and file a cease and desist against any further claims to property authority. But it wouldn't be enough to stop her, not fully, because as long as she was living there, physically occupying the space, she had teeny presence, which meant I had to go through formal channels to remove her. An owner can't just throw someone out, even if they're a manipulative liar, which meant I needed to prepare for eviction proceedings. And the forgery? I asked. That's criminal, he said. If we press charges, she could face real consequences, fines, maybe jail time, depending on the judge. I sat in silence, the weight of it all pressing against my ribs. She didn't just overstep, she forged my signature, lied to the government, registered herself as my proxy, tried to steal not just my home, but my legal identity within it. She planned this, I whispered, for years. Callahan looked at me with sympathy, but no surprise. That much is clear. I went home with a thick folder of instructions, forms, and a list of steps to initiate immediate legal response. But I didn't go inside. I sat in my car in the driveway, watching the front window. Frank was lounging on the couch, feet up on the table, beer in hand. Veronica walked behind him, laughing at something, he said, like they'd been living here their entire lives. My hands trembled on the steering wheel. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't miscommunication or desperation. This was a heist, slow, methodical, and cruel. But they underestimated something. I wasn't the same 14-year-old girl they left behind. I was a grown woman with power, proof, and now paperwork. And I was going to take back what was mine. I didn't wait until the next morning. I walked into the house, my folder in hand, heart pounding like a war drum. Frank was in the kitchen, rummaging through the fridge like it was his. He barely looked up. "Where's Veronica?" "In the back, garden or something." I passed through the house, my house, each step heavier than the last. The smell of her perfume lingered in the air, faint but familiar, like every boundary she'd ever crossed. She was trimming a potted plant near the back porch when she saw me. "Hey, sweetie," she said casually, like nothing was wrong. "We need to talk," I said. Her smile flickered. "Of course, let me just now." She put the clippers down slowly and followed me inside. I led her to the dining table and laid the folder down between us. "What's this?" "Proof," I said, "of everything." I opened the folder. First the property deed with my name in bold. Then the copy of the forged proxy form, her fake signature circled in red. A notarized statement from me declaring it fraudulent. A printout of the registration page listing her falsely as head of household. I let her look, let her absorb it. She didn't deny it. Instead, she reached for my hand. "Julia," she said, voice trembling. "I know how this looks, but I never meant to hurt you. I wanted to stay close. I made mistakes, I know that. But I've lost so much in my life. I thought maybe finally I could have a place again. A family, you." Tears welled up in her eyes. She clutched her chest like her heart might break. "I only ever wanted to be with you. I thought if I showed I could help, could run things, maybe you'd let me stay longer." I panicked. I didn't know how to ask. I felt something twist in my chest. Even after all this, some part of me, the abandoned daughter who still remembered her mother's perfume from age 7, wanted to believe her. "I would have helped you," I said quietly, If you just asked, but you didn't. You lied. You forged documents. You tried to steal from me. Her eyes brimmed. She wiped them fast like she couldn't afford the mess. I didn't know what else to do. You've always been so closed off, so cold, because you left me. She flinched, the silence stretched. Then something in her face shifted. The tearful softness drained away like paint washed off with rain. Her shoulders squared, her jaw tightened. I couldn't let a selfish, ungrateful child be the one in charge of this house, she said flatly. It hit like a slap. What did you just say? She looked me dead in the eye. You don't deserve this place, Julia. You think because Grandma left it to you in a will written out of guilt that it makes you the queen of the castle. You don't even know what it means to have a home. You float through life thinking degrees and titles make you better than everyone. I stared at her. So this was all fake. She crossed her arms. You never wanted me here. You never gave me a chance. Frank and I, we were going to build something real here. Frank? I laughed dry and sharp. You mean the guy living rentry in a house he thinks he owns because you let him play husband while you rewrote history? I tried being nice, she said. I tried playing the good mother, but you just pushed and pushed. I pushed. You forged my name. Veronica didn't answer. She just looked towards the hallway. I followed her gaze. Boxes stacked, labelled my books, my clothes, my linens, a suitcase. What is this? I asked, my voice quiet. She didn't answer. I rushed to the front window and there it was, a moving truck parked in the driveway. 2 men in navy uniforms walking up the porch steps. Morning, one of them said cheerfully. Here for the pickup. Is this the Roberts residence? I turned slowly to face her. You called movers. She didn't blink. I figured we'd make it easier on everyone. You were going to pack my life while I was at work. You weren't using half that stuff anymore, she said coolly. My throat dried as, Where were you sending it? She shrugged. Storage. Maybe Camille could let you crash at her place for a bit. Or you could rent a studio. You're resourceful. I couldn't speak. The audacity, the betrayal, the calculated orchestration of every detail. You were never coming here to reconcile. I said you were coming to replace me. Call it what you want, she said. But this house, this life, you're not the only one who suffered. I built something here once before you were even born. I'm just taking back what's mine. I looked at the movers, then at the boxes, then back at her. No, I said calmly, quietly, dead certain. You don't get to take anything. Not anymore. She rolled her eyes. What, you're going to call your lawyer? I smiled. No, I already did. I didn't sleep that night. Even after the movers left, confused, apologizing, muttering about a cancellation call they hadn't seen coming, I sat in my study, surrounded by half-packed boxes and the fading echo of my mother's words. I'm just taking back what's mine. I didn't know what hurt more, the lie she told, or the fact that I had almost believed the version of her who wept and called me sweetheart. That night I poured myself a glass of wine and pulled out the old cedar trunk I hadn't opened in years. It lived in the corner of the guest room closet where I'd stored it after Grandma's passing. Inside were things I hadn't touched since I was 22. Holiday cards, recipe books, embroidered napkins, and a thick leather-bound journal I used to sneak peeks at when Grandma wasn't looking. Her handwriting had always comforted me, loopy and precise, confident. I opened the journal and ran my fingers down the yellowed pages. I wasn't even sure what I was looking for, maybe just a piece of myself, a tether to someone who had truly loved me. But I found more than that. Tucked between 2 pages from 1998 was an envelope. My name was on it in careful cursive for Julia should she ever need the truth. I stared at it for a full minute before opening it. Inside was a single sheet of paper, handwritten. It began with a sentence that made my blood run cold. If Veronica ever returns, be careful. She doesn't come for family. She comes for what she thinks she's owed. I kept reading. I never wanted to push her away, Julia, but your mother has a way of bending truth to her advantage. Even as a child, she lied without blinking. When she turned 25, she got involved in something that nearly cost us the house. Fraud, theft, manipulation. She forged my name on loan papers. She nearly destroyed us. I gave her a choice: leave quietly or I press charges. She chose to disappear. I raised you alone, not because I wanted to, but because I had to. My hands trembled. I read it again and again. This wasn't just about me. It had never been about me. Veronica hadn't returned because she missed her daughter. She came back to finish what she started decades ago, and this time she didn't have Grandma to stop her. I sat there until the sun started bleeding through the blinds. Then I picked up my phone and started searching public records, archives, old articles, everything I could find tied to her full name, Veronica Marie Harris. It didn't take long. An article from 2001, local woman investigated for charity embezzlement, no charges filed. Another from 2003, property dispute in Savannah. Allegations of signature forgery, all dismissed, no convictions, just rumors, whispers, but they all shared one name, hers. Then I found it, an old bankruptcy filing from 2005 filed under a different city, a different address, and attached to it a list of creditors, including a luxury furniture rental service and an estate planning consultant. She had done this before, moved in, gained control, shifted ownership, extracted value, then vanished. I felt cold, empty, furious. The woman I had tried to protect, the woman I thought I was healing with, she had come to bleed me dry, and she'd almost succeeded. I closed the journal, folded the letter, and tucked both into my legal folder. Then I made a copy of everything. That afternoon, I handed it all to Callahan. He read silently. When he finished, he leaned back and whistled low. "This changes everything," he said. "You believe her?" I asked. He gave a small smile. "I believe you, but now we have historical patterns, a motive, a record. What do we do next?" He set the papers down. "We go to court." The next logical step was Frank. If Veronica had a history of manipulation, then Frank, her supposed partner, had to be more than just an oblivious couch-surfing boyfriend. I started digging. It wasn't hard. He had a digital footprint the size of a crater, old mugshot, court records, a trail of aliases, and bad checks that stretch back 20 years. Fraud, identity theft, even a short prison sentence in 2011 for a real estate scam involving fake rentals and forged leases. My heart sank as I read through the charges. He was a con man, and she had brought him into my home, introduced him as family, and let him touch my personal documents. Callahan took one look at the printouts and nodded. "Perfect," he said. "This supports the claim that both of them were working in concert." Together, we compiled a comprehensive case file: Veronica's forged signature attempt, the false household registration, her past record of financial manipulation, Frank's criminal background, Grandma's handwritten warning letter, and my documented ownership history. By the time we filed the official notice to vacate and the civil lawsuit for damages and fraudulent occupancy, I felt something shift. I wasn't reacting anymore. I was leading. It took less than a week for the paperwork to reach them. I handed the envelope to Veronica myself, watching her face transform from confusion to irritation to thinly veiled rage. "You're suing your own mother," she spat. "I'm holding a criminal accountable," I replied. She threw the papers on the floor. "You're going to regret this, Julia. You think the courts care about your little feelings about some letter from a dead woman?" I didn't answer. Frank stormed out of the bedroom that night, shouting nonsense about slander and privacy invasion. I calmly reminded him that his residency was illegal and that the eviction clock had started. They had 30 days, but things weren't done unraveling. 2 days later, I got a call from Callahan's office. "You're going to want to sit down for this," his assistant said. I braced myself. "Your mother didn't lose her home, Julia." I blinked. What? She wasn't evicted. She didn't fall on hard time. She left town to avoid a subpoena. Callahan came on the line. "A creditor in Atlanta has been pursuing a civil judgment against her for months." She defaulted on a series of high-value loans, opened in her name, and under a shell LLC she created to buy antique furniture on consignment. She ran, I said flatly. Yes, she came here not because she needed you, but because she needed cover. I sat down, the full weight of it pressing on my chest. She hadn't sought reconciliation. She hadn't missed her daughter. She'd needed a shield, a safer address to disappear into, and she used me as her camouflage. My hands curled into fists. All the warm glances, the soft words, the angel comments, all of it scripted, calculated, manipulative. But I wasn't her shield, not anymore. I took the final steps that afternoon. A formal protective ownership order barring her from using my address for any legal, financial, or residency documentation. I filed a supplemental criminal complaint for document forgery and impersonation. Then I did the one thing I'd been holding off on. I changed the locks and I posted the court notice on the door. They had until the end of the month to leave, or the sheriff would escort them out. For the first time in weeks, I slept soundly. No movement in the kitchen, no shuffled footsteps in the hallway, just quiet. The kind that feels earned, the kind that says you're safe now. The courtroom was colder than I expected. Maybe it was the way the overhead lights hummed, or how the pew-style benches seemed built more for punishment than seating. Maybe it was just the silence, that loaded, sharp kind that settles right before something irreversible happens. Veronica sat to my left, flanked by her attorney. Frank slouched beside her, unshaven, arms crossed, his eyes darting towards the exit every few seconds, like a man hoping for a fire drill. I didn't look at either of them. I focused on the judge, on the stack of evidence in front of her, on the fact that finally someone in authority would hear everything I'd been carrying for weeks, maybe years. The hearing moved fast. Callahan presented our case with surgical precision. Proof of ownership, the fraudulent proxy, the registration manipulation, Frank's criminal record, Veronica's pending financial charges in Atlanta, and the handwritten letter from my grandmother, a document that, even in its faded ink, hit harder than any legal brief. Their lawyer tried to spin it. "She's just a mother trying to reconnect," he said. Any missteps were acts of desperation, not malice. But the judge wasn't moved. She looked at Veronica and asked plainly, "Did you file this form claiming your daughter had given you power of attorney?" Veronica shifted in her seat. "I misunderstood the paperwork. It contains her forged signature." "I thought she said she wanted help. It was emotional. Did you forge it?" the judge asked again, voice steady. Veronica went silent. Frank tried to interject something about his rights as a tenant, but the judge cut him off. "You're not on any lease. You've paid no rent. You have no legal standing here." By the time the gavel came down, it felt like a release. The order was clear. Veronica and Frank were to vacate the property within 72 hours. A restraining order was issued preventing further contact or attempts to claim residency. Charges for forgery and identity fraud were forwarded to the district attorney's office. And just like that, it was over. But not really, because then the judge turned to me. "Miss Roberts," she said, "is there anything you'd like to say before we conclude?" I stood slowly. I hadn't planned on speaking, but something inside me, a kind of truth that had waited years for air, rose to the surface. "Yes," I said, voice clear. "I just want to say that family doesn't mean forever." A few people stirred in their seats. I went on, "Blood doesn't give you the right to steal from someone. It doesn't excuse betrayal. It doesn't entitle you to a home or a history or a second chance if all you intend to do is destroy it. Family isn't just who you're born to, it's who shows up, who stays, who protects you." I looked at Veronica. Her face was unreadable. I spent most of my life wondering what I did wrong to make her leave. Turns out I was never the problem. She just couldn't take anything unless she had control of it. And when she couldn't control me anymore, she tried to erase me. I paused. "Let that sink in. I'm not angry," I added. "I'm free. And now so is this house. So am I." The judge nodded. That was it. Outside the courthouse, the sky had turned a pale winter grey. Callahan clapped me gently on the shoulder, offered a half smile, and said he'd be in touch once the criminal charges moved forward. I didn't go home right away. I sat in my car watching Veronica and Frank across the parking lot as they argued next to the rusting pickup they'd arrived in. Frank was red-faced, flailing. Veronica stood stiff, arms crossed, jaw clenched. She glanced over once and our eyes met. She didn't look sorry, she looked defeated. But even then, I didn't feel triumphant, just done. When I finally walked through my front door that afternoon, the silence that greeted me was different. Not cold, not empty, just mine. The hallway was still lined with scuffed walls, boxes I hadn't unpacked, dust on the windowsill, but it was mine again. No more schedules on the fridge, no more passive-aggressive notes, no more strangers on the couch, just a quiet house waiting to be filled again. This time with peace. Veronica left on a Thursday. No dramatic goodbye, no last-minute plea for forgiveness, just the sound of the front door closing around noon and the low rumble of an engine pulling away from the driveway. I watched from the upstairs window, not out of spite, but out of habit. I wanted to see if she'd look back, if she'd hesitate even for a second. She didn't. Frank was already gone. He'd packed the night before and left early in the morning, slamming doors and muttering curses like the victim of an unfair system. I didn't speak to him, didn't acknowledge him. There was nothing left to say. When I came downstairs, the house felt lighter area, as if it had been holding its breath for weeks, and was finally allowed to exhale. Boxes still lined the hallway from their nearly executed coup. Their plans to remove me had ended with their own removal. I stood there in the middle of the living room, listening to the stillness. No TV blaring, no new age music, no Frank talking to himself, no Veronica humming her fake contentment, just quiet. I spent the next few days reclaiming the house one drawer at a time. I threw out the burlap runners, the mason jar centerpieces, the smelly incense sticks tucked in corners. I donated their cookware, scrubbed the bathrooms, reorganized the bookshelves, washed the sheets, took down the god-awful blackout curtains, and let light pour in again. Then I found myself standing in front of the empty spot above the fireplace, the place where Grandma's portrait used to hang. I had boxed it up out of fear they'd destroy it, but now it was time to bring her back. I unwrapped the frame carefully. Her face, frozen in paint and time, looked back at me with the same calm wisdom that had once steadied me as a child. Her eyes always seemed to know things before anyone else did. "I did it, Grandma," I whispered. "I protected it. I protected me." I hung the portrait and stepped back. There, the house felt whole again. I took a deep breath and let it out slowly. It didn't hurt anymore, not like before. The sting of abandonment, the ache of betrayal, it was still there, like a scar, but it no longer dictated who I was. I wasn't the girl she left behind. I wasn't the woman who nearly let her mother steal everything out of desperation for love. I was the homeowner, the protector of my peace. That weekend, Camille came over with wine and takeout. We sat on the floor, surrounded by candles and laughter, reminiscing about college days and awful dates, and how she just knew Frank was shady from the first moment she saw him. "Do you regret letting her in?" she asked gently, swirling her wine. I paused. "No," I said, "because I needed to know. I needed to see for myself. Closure doesn't come from people changing. It comes from you understanding that they won't." Camille nodded and we clinked glasses. I spent the next few weeks slowly rebuilding my life. Work felt easier. My lectures were sharper, my energy lighter. Students noticed. Some even stayed after class just to chat, a small joy I hadn't had in months. I planted a new garden, bought a dog, painted the guest room a soft yellow, and turned it into a reading nook. It became my favorite place to drink tea and read old mystery novels. And sometimes when I passed the portrait of Grandma, I would smile and whisper, "We're okay now." Then came the letter. It arrived a month after the court hearing. No return address, just my name in Veronica's cursive. Inside was a single page. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't expect anything. I just wanted you to know that somewhere I do feel sorry. Not for what I did, but for who I couldn't be. Maybe in another life, I would have been better. I didn't cry. I didn't respond. I folded the letter, placed it in a drawer, and let it be part of the story, but not the ending. The ending was mine to write. As I sat on the porch that evening, the sky blooming orange and lavender, the dog curled beside my feet, a cup of tea in hand, I looked around my home, the walls I fought for, the memories I preserved, the peace I reclaimed, and I finally understood what home meant. It wasn't about who shared your blood. It wasn't even about who stayed. It was about who respected you. And in that moment, with the wind brushing against the chimes and the old oak tree swaying gently outside the fence, I smiled and whispered to myself, home is where they cherish okay.